Hey, it's Gabby. Today I'm going to show you how to make Aaron Douglas inspired art. Aaron Douglas is an incredible artist that came out of the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance was a time in the 1920s when African American art of all kinds became very popular. Black poets, writers, artists, musicians, and philosophers used their voice to celebrate who they were. This movement was like a creative explosion, and we're still seeing the effects and the influence of it 100 years later. Aaron Douglas is often referred to as the father of African American art. Unlike artists that came before him, he didn't shy away from being called a black artist. He wanted to show how important black people were in building America. He came to Harlem in the early 1920s, and he did a lot of work for books and magazines. He also painted scenes around the city, but he's most famous for his murals, in which he showed black daily life and history. He liked to make his figures big so that people could see them, even from far away. He drew large silhouettes or shadow designs of people performing dramatic, heroic actions. He showed them putting up buildings, praying, dancing, acting proud. He used basic shapes so you couldn't misunderstand his art. After the Harlem Renaissance ended, Douglas went to Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, where he became the head of the art department. Douglas continued to paint throughout his entire life, and he passed away when he was 79 years old in Nashville, Tennessee. Before we start making our Aaron Douglas inspired art, it's important to take a good look at his art and really study what makes it unique. So what I'm looking at here is the colors that he uses. He uses colors that are mostly in the same color scheme, and I'm looking for something that'll catch my eye and that I'll want to kind of replicate. Okay, I think I found it. This picture right here is what I'm going for, but I want to change up the colors a little bit. I want to make it more like these purpley tones from this picture and maybe this picture here. So I'm going to use the colors from this picture and some of the design from that first picture that I showed you. Today, I'm going to be working with acrylic paints, but you can use whatever you have: colored pencils, pastels, crayons, markers, watercolor paints. Whatever it is, you can follow along and make your own Aaron Douglas inspired art. So first thing that we're going to do is gather up our colors. So no matter what you're using, you're going to need a lot of the same kind of color. That's what Aaron Douglas usually did. He stayed within his color scheme. So you can see here with my paint, I'm kind of playing around to find a purple that I really like. And once I found that purple, I'm starting to make different shades by adding white. And you can also add black to make darker shades. So I'm just gonna go along here and make a couple different piles. Because I'm using paint, I went ahead and painted my canvas just my favorite shade of purple. That way I have something I can work on. If you are using something other than paint, feel free to just start with your blank piece of paper and your pencil. So I'm going to go ahead and do my sketch, starting in the corner with this little piece of a circle that's showing through. So I'm going to go ahead and do that curved line. And the next thing I'm going to do is the land that our guy is standing on. So I'm just going to do a nice little hill that's going to connect down to the corner of the canvas. Next, I'm going to add those little mountains in the background. So starting over on the left side, I'm going to go ahead and throw 3 little overlapping hills in the distance. And they get smaller as they go. Next, we're going to do this rainbow shape that we see here, coming from the circle in the right corner up off the canvas. So I'm going to start with just a line, mapping out where that's going to go. And then I'm going to add another line following the same curve right below it. I'm going to do 2 more lines like that until I have my 3 stripes. Now for the next rainbow shape, this one's a little more squiggly. It's going to start right at the top of my first rainbow and then go up into the top right-hand corner of my page. So I'm doing the same thing. I made my first squiggle and then I'm making those 3 stripes, just following the same pattern as that first one. Now for our overlapping circles. So we're going to start with that first circle that we made, and we're going to add an overlapping circle sitting right on top of it. And then another one, this one's a little smaller and it's leaning inward. And then from here, we're completely leaning into this area in between our 2 rainbows. And we're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Remember when you're making these circles to use the big muscles in your arm. So lock your elbow and move your whole arm as you make these circles. Well, at least when you make the big ones. When you make the little ones, you can move over to using your fingers. So far we have our rainbows and our overlapping circles. Now it's time to add our person who's looking up at the sky. Thankfully, he kind of looks like a stick figure, so he shouldn't be too hard to draw. What I'm going to do is start with a line, and then I'm doing another line just for the shoulders, and then bringing it down on either side for the arms. From here, I just did 2 little lines sticking out. Since his hands are kind of funny, they go out a little bit. So I'm just kind of making the shape of the body, which goes out a little bit at the hips, and then it comes together like he's standing with his legs close together. For his head, I just made an oval facing up at the sky. Next, I'm going to add that little bush that's sitting over to the left of our guy. That's really easy to do. All I'm going to do is a line coming up from the ground, and there's going to be a leaf sitting right on top of it. And then we have leaves coming off of either side. Okay, now it's time to get painting. I'm going to use all the different shades of purple that I mixed earlier and just fill in my design. Now I am keeping an eye on my reference photo. Remember that original picture was like a bunch of different shades of green. I'm doing a bunch of different shades of purple, but I still paid attention to where the values were going. Let's say that there was a light green in a certain spot, I will put a light purple on mine. So that's something you can do if you're kind of confused about where to put what color, but honestly, you can't go wrong. You're using a bunch of different shades of the same color, so just have fun with it. Just make sure that there's some contrast. If you put 2 colors that look too closely like each other, next to each other, then you're not going to be able to tell the difference. So just keep experimenting, keep mixing more different shades of your color if you're using paint. If you're using markers or pastels, just make sure you're not putting the same color right next to each other. I also want to point out how every single little space, every little overlap has a different color in it that's different from what's around it. So just make sure to pay attention to detail and add that in. That's what's going to make it look really cool in the end. Thanks so much for making art with me today. I'll see you next week with a brand new project.